Hi everyone, my name is Ivan, and today I want to tell you about test quarantine or how to manage with flaky tests. And I really hope that it will be interesting and useful for you. And first of all, let me introduce myself. Again, my name is Ivan Varivoda. I am QA automation technical lead in Wrike, and I have been working in QA automation more than 4 years. And last 3 years, I have been working for Wrike, where I develop and improve our key automation framework and key automation infrastructure. And also, I like skiing and riding a motorbike. And in the bottom right corner, you can see my contacts. So feel free to ask me about this presentation. And let me show you the plan of today's presentation. First of all, I want to show you what is it flaky tests. What is wrong with flaky tests, and how we can manage with these tests by using common solutions. Second part will be about test quarantine, what is it and how it works. Then I will show you how we can improve test quarantine by using automated processes. And finally, I will discuss our results after implementation this scheme. And I want to remind you about key automation in Wrike. As Sergey has said, we have more than 24,000 Selenium tests, and also 200,000 tests are run daily in our infrastructure, and our tests framework has more than 1 million lines of code, and we can run all our tests in 1 hour and 1.5 hours. And it allows us to deploy our product every day. And as you can see, we have a lot of Selenium tests. And unfortunately, these tests are not very stable. And if you Google why Selenium tests are, the first result will be why Selenium tests are flaky. And what is a flaky test? Let's define this term. In our opinion, flaky test, this is test which fails randomly, and failures are related with structure and logic of the test. And this test could be stabilized. I mean, you can write more code or refactor your current code, and after this, your test will be more stable. And to understand it better, I want to show you a few examples of not flaky failures and flaky failures. The first reason is bug. Imagine that your front end has bug and your Selenium test doesn't work correctly, so this is not flaky failures for us. Another reason is broken test environment. For example, your backend doesn't work fine, and there are a lot of errors in responses with 500 codes, and it can cause some problems in your test. So this is not flaky failures for us too. And the third reason is weak test environment. Imagine I want to run all our tests in 200 threads, but our backend isn't ready for these actions, and there are a lot of requests which are stuck on the backend side. So in this case, we can have a lot of failures, and this is not flaky failures for us as well. And the last reason, this is infrastructure problems. Imagine that your farm doesn't work and you can't create new session of WebDriver for your Selenium tests. So these are not flaky failures as well. What about flaky failures? First example is lack of waiting on front-end side. For example, your test opens your web application and doesn't wait for enough time while your application is loaded. So in this case, you can see flaky failures. Or lack of waiting on backend side. For example, your Selenium test starts some asynchronous operation on the backend side and doesn't wait for enough time while this operation is finished. So in this case, you will have flaky failures as well. And the last reason is auto-generated test data. For example, in our test, we generate a lot of entities like tasks. And imagine that in first test run, your test generated task with 10 letters title. And in the second run, your test generates a task with 20 letters title. So titles, the size of titles are different, and it can cause some problems in our test as well. And for us, these are not flaky. I'm sorry, flaky fails. And let's go further. And I want to answer this question: what is wrong with flaky tests? Why are they bad? And in our opinion, flaky tests are harmful because firstly, they hide bugs. For example, imagine that you have flaky test and it passes and it fails and it passes and it fails. So in this case, you easily can miss real bugs, and this is problem. Second reason is undermine confidence. For example, imagine that each day you see a lot of failures, flaky failures, and you can get used to have them, and one day you will ignore these failures and deploy the increment of your product to project stagings, and you will probably you will have some problems on your product, on your production. I mean, this is a bad situation as well. The third reason is wasting time on additional checks. For example, in test run has 5 failed flaky tests. So in this case, you have to do these checks manually or rerun these tests and waste some time on these actions. And as consequently, flaky tests slow down the deploy process. And for us, this is really important because we deploy daily and we have to do it as fast as we can. And how to manage flaky tests in terms of common solutions? The first solution is using automation frameworks like HTML elements or Atlas or Selenium. Maybe you are familiar with these frameworks, maybe you are not, maybe you have your own solution, but the main idea here is next. So these frameworks usually have some features like explicit weightings or more convenient ways to finding elements on the page, and these features can help you to make your tests more stable. Second solution, common solution, is improving test quality by using static analyzers like SonarQube or PMD, or just using review process. So it can help to make your tests more stable as well. And the third solution is just run failed test. So I think this solution is obvious. And we had all this stuff, but our tests kept failing, and we saw a lot of pictures like these ones. So here you can see that we had one broken test, and then we ran it, and then it passed. So here you can see really real flaky test. And we started to think, maybe is there another solution for this problem? And we came up with test quarantine. And let's define this term. For us, test quarantine is complex of restrictive measures aimed at isolation of flaky tests and control them. And let me show you a scheme how it works. Imagine that you have after test project, and also you have external system. And you have one more model, test runner here. Firstly, test runner gets all information about flaky tests or isolated tests from external system. Then it recognizes these tests among all our after tests. And after these actions, it can work only with necessary, not isolated tests. And let's look at external system in details. So external system can be your test management system. Usually this system has labels, tags, fields, or another stuff which you can use for marking up your tests. In our case, we have Allure server as test management system, and this TMS has entity like mute, so we can create mute with name, reason, and some issue ID, and link this mute to our test case. I will tell you about it later in details. And the third point here, external system may be just file. For example, here you can see muted list JSON file, which has information about our flaky tests. You can see here ID and full names of our isolated tests. And the second main really important model in this scheme is test runner. And the first goal of our test runner is excluding isolated tests. So test runner has to run only not isolated tests. And usually this test pass. And the second goal of the test runner is executing only isolated tests. So our runner has input command like run only isolated. And after getting this command, test runner has to run only isolated tests, and usually they fail. So we need this functionality for getting more statistic about our isolated tests, and I will tell you about it later in details. And I told a lot about test runner, and here I put a few links which you can use, and you can find on my GitHub the example of test runner, so feel free to use this code and use it. And we are going further. Right now, I want to show you how we can mute and unmute our test. I mean, how we can add our test into quarantine and how we can remove the test from quarantine. So here we can see a broken test. And as you can see, this test has really bad history, and we have to isolate it. So we can click just mute button. After that, we have to fill necessary inputs like name of the mute and issue ID, and click on submit button. So after these actions, our test is muted, and it won't be run by our test builds. And we can also unmute this test, just click on unmute button. So it's really easy. And also we can mute and unmute our tests by using API of external system. For example, Allure server has REST API, and we can find all mutes or create new mute for our test case automatically, and we use this API in our bots. And one more important thing which I want to emphasize, this is issue ID. So this number is ID of task for stabilization or fix the test, and we need it to don't forget about muted tests and for getting additional information for removing test from our test quarantine. So this is a really important part of this scheme. Don't forget about it. And let's look at how we can improve our test quarantine by using automated processes. For this purpose, we develop test health system. This is just Spring Boot application with Postgres database. And this system daily analyzes all our tests, alert responsibles for tests, automatic mute our web tests with low success rate, and also automatic unmute flaky tests with really high success rate. And right now I want to show you a few examples of alerting of this instrument. On this picture you can see that our bot sent us information that 18 tests were muted today because they were broken. Or here you can see a message that 20 tests were successfully unmuted by our bot. And also here there are a few mentions for responsibles of the test. And last example is about isolation unstable tests. So here our bot muted a few tests which have really low success rate, less than 98% for our case, and our bot muted these tests. And finally, I want to show you a few results. First of all, I want to show you how success rate of Selenium test was changing. So we started with 75% and then then increased this lower bound to 85%, and right now we are here. So it means that each hour test, web test, has a success rate more than 85%, and I want to emphasize that the average success rate usually is more than 99%. So here I am talking about only lower bound. And also we are thinking right now about going further and increase this value again. Maybe it will be 90%, maybe it will be 95%. We do not know yet. And here I want to show you information about changing of success rate for API tests. So we started with 85%, 95%. Then we increased this value to 98%, and right now we are here. And also we want to go further, but here we have some problems because this lower bound is really high, and we have to resolve some issues to go further. And last slide is about working of test health system. So here you can see the count of muted tests, and the first main thing is that our test quarantine has more than 500 tests for all the time, and each day the count of muted tests is different. So our tests, some tests were muted from our, some tests were added into our test quarantine, or some tests were removed from our test quarantine. So this system works fine, and this way, and you can struggle with flaky tests by using this scheme. So that's all from my side. Thank you for your attention,